Today is Tisha B'Av and it's 11 o'clock. Thank you for that book. It's 11 o'clock. It's Tisha B'Av, 11 o'clock in the morning, so it's not yet Chatzos, not yet midday. So, because of the restrictions of the day of Tisha B'Av, the day we mourn the destruction of the two Batei Mikdash, the two temples, we don't sit on chairs, and we sit on the floor in order to remember the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the destruction of the temple. And also we're restricted on what we can learn. In other words, we can't, because it says that Torah, today Hashem Yisharim B'Samchei Leiv, Torah makes us happy. Interesting, when kids go to school and they study, they don't think the Torah makes them so happy. They have homework, they have tests. But actually, we know that for the soul, for sure, learning Torah makes us happy. So therefore, and even not just for the soul, if you really study Torah in the way it's supposed to be, and that is Lo'olam Yilmod Adam B'Makom Shelibo Chafetz, a person should study Torah in the topic that he enjoys, a person should study Torah in the language he understands, a person should study Torah in a way that inspires him. So when somebody studies Torah in that way, so we know that B'Samchei Leiv, it brings us joy. And on Tisha B'Av, because it's a day that we remember the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, so we're not supposed to do anything that's Masiach Dat, that takes away our mind from thinking about the destruction. So therefore we can't study usual class material because that would make us happy. However, since usually at 11 o'clock on Sunday we study, and since it's not just we study with those that are here in our own shul, but we actually, last week we started going live, and we know that there are some people watching from all over Thailand, so therefore rather than cancel and say there won't be a class, so let's study things we're allowed to study on Tisha B'Av, because a Jew always has to study Torah. You know that when the Romans came and took the Jews into exile, one of the things they tried to stamp out was the study of the Torah and the transmission of Torah. So one of the things they stamped out immediately was the concept of smicha, the concept of transmission. Smicha was giving, literally, ordination. Smicha means to lean your hands, to lean. The way it was done was that when one rabbi wanted to ordain another rabbi, he would literally put his hands on him and he would say, I hereby give you permission, I ordain you, and I give you the right to be able to judge laws relating to particular fields of Judaism. We still call this process of rabbinical ordination, we still call it smicha, but it's not actually the same, it doesn't have the same gravity, because Moshe Rabbeinu did the process of smicha. He ordained Yoshua. Yoshua did it to his disciples, their disciples to their disciples, and so it went on with an unbroken chain of ordination from Moshe Rabbeinu till the Sanhedrin. But once this process was lost, because the Romans stamped it out, they made it a capital punishment to ordain a student. So what happened was that we lost that form, that high-level form of smicha of ordination. And they were very, very smart, because so long as you had that ordination, there wouldn't be able to even be any divergent opinions or different such divergent customs, because there would have been one body of Jewish rabbinic law that would have been deciding everything for the entire Jewish nation. What happened was, because of the Roman edict, and then later the dispersion of the Jewish people to countries that they could not have any contact one with each other. You had Jewish communities in countries as diverse as the Ashkenazi countries, Germany and so on, and then you had those that were in Yemen, you had those that were in all other countries, South America and so on, and they lost contact with each other, so you had widely varying Jewish customs that developed. And so therefore, because as I was saying, the Romans understood that transmitting the Torah was the key for Jewish unity, was the key for Jewish continuity. And therefore there was a stage where they also outlawed the concept of studying of Torah with students. And so one of the analogies given why the teachers of Torah, the Jewish scholars, the Jewish leaders, would not stop teaching Torah was because they said it's like a fish in water. Can you tell a fish to go out of the water and to continue to live? That would be foolish. When a fish is in water, he lives. When he's not in water, he's going to die. Similarly, when it comes to Torah, it says the Torah is our life. It's our life, and that's what gives us length of days. So to tell a Jew to stop studying Torah is to tell a Jew to stop living. Which is why the Rebbe used to speak very disparagingly about the concept of summer vacation for yeshivas. So it's a very strange thing. What do you tell a yeshiva? You tell a student, you worked hard for 10 months, and so the Rebbe called it a wilde Anhoge, a wild kind of outlandish behavior. You tell a kid that for 10 months he's studying Torah, and you tell him the Torah is the most important thing in the world, the Torah is your life. And what do you tell him? Now you need 2 months to relax. To relax from what? To relax from life. You can't stop living in order to get more life. Life is something that continues. So really it's something that's very, very, the concept of vacation in terms of study of Torah does not exist. The Jew always has an obligation to study Torah. He always has the opportunity and the merit to study Torah. So when it comes to Tisha B'Av, we say you can't study Torah, that's a misnomer. You could study Torah, you have to study Torah. We don't stop living on Tisha B'Av. But we're supposed to study the portions of Torah that are more sad. Portions of Torah that make us more introspective. The portions of Torah that remind us of what we once had and what we don't have. And that is, of course, the Beis HaMikdash. So on Tisha B'Av, these are the items we study. So the things we can study are the book of Job, the book of Eov, which talks about trials and tribulations and suffering. We can study the prophecies, as we did last night, the book that Jeremiah writes, the Megillas Eicha, Lamentations, where he speaks about the suffering that Yerushalayim will go through and the Jewish people. And then we can also study the different stories that the Medrash tells us, the Gemara tells us, various stories of Jewish suffering that took place. Now interestingly, the first thing you would think in terms of Jewish suffering in today's day and age is you would think Holocaust. And that's very true. The closest major suffering of epic proportion that we have to our historical times is the Holocaust. Yet, still, traditionally, we still sit down on the floor and we talk about the suffering that took place in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, the times of the destruction of the second temple, how many people were killed, how cities and towns and communities were wiped out, the tortures they went through. When in reality, one would think that today, in the year 2016, we're a mere 70 years away, 70 plus years away from the Holocaust, and it would think that would be the tragedy that would occupy mostly our thought process, our psyche, our awareness. Yet we talk about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So there's an interesting thought about that. Even all our fast days are connected with things that took place in the Beis HaMikdash. Asara B'Tevis, the fast of the 10th of Tevis, we commemorate when the wall of Yerushalayim was breached. When the siege was laid around Yerushalayim. Samach Melech Bavel Yerushalayim. And we fast on that day because the siege was the beginning of the destruction. And in a sense, the siege, the day we fast for the siege, the 10th of Tevis, in a sense is even more powerful and has more energy attached to it than even the subsequent days of destruction, because everything begins from the beginning. That's why we have a concept, Kol ha'atchalot kashot. All beginnings are difficult. We know this from life. What's the most difficult part of exercising? Everybody knows. The most difficult part of exercising is beginning. Somebody goes on a treadmill, the most difficult few minutes is the few minutes that he begins. Once you begin, it gets easier. Kol ha'atchalot kashot. And that's why there are so many projects and good resolutions that we never do, because we just never start them. If you somehow kickstart yourself into starting them, the continuation is easier. So it goes that way also with the destruction of the Batei Mikdash. We talk about the 10th of Tevis, where the siege was laid to Yerushalayim. So that was, in a sense, the foundational move and the beginning of of all of our tzoros, of all of our trials and tribulations. Then we move on from there to Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th day of Tammuz, which that's the day that the walls of Jerusalem were breached. And from there was fighting in Yerushalayim until they reached, on the 7th day of Av, they reached the actual site of the Beit HaMikdash of the temple, and then there was hand-to-hand combat. The Kohanim, the Jewish people, were not about to let the enemy desecrate and destroy the Beit HaMikdash. They fought hand-to-hand. It was a bloody combat. And finally on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av, which is today, the Romans overcame the Jewish people, and they started, during the day, they started burning down, actually towards evening, they started burning down the temple, which continued till tomorrow. Actually, today is the 10th of Av, because yesterday was the 9th of Av, it was Shabbos. We couldn't observe any of the laws of fasting. and it laws of mourning. So actually today is the 10th of Av. The temple is burning today, almost 2,000 years ago. And so these are the things we commemorate when we fast. So the question you could ask is, really, the thing that's closer to us today would be things like the Holocaust. Or go a little bit further back, what we call Tach V'Tat, in the year 5,408, 5,409. These are events that took place with Khmelnytsky, terrible pogroms that took place all across Russia. And that's also closer to us. But we talk much less about them. We talk mainly about what was taking place in Yerushalayim. So what's the reason for that? So to understand that, we have to understand generally the way we as Jews view our history. We view the people, the history of the people of Israel is a one long voyage. It's one long journey that takes place starting from Adam, more specifically when it comes to Jews, starting from Abraham Avinu, yet even more specifically when it comes to us, starting from the Exodus from Egypt, mainly starting from the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai, where we truly become a people. We become Am Yisrael. So we view everything taking place from the giving of the Torah at Sinai, or from Avraham Avinu, or even in a more general way from Adam, as being one long journey that we're part of. And we're just a mere small part of it. What do I mean? When we talk about the journey of mankind throughout this world, so God has a plan. Hashem has a plan, and He gives the lead role to the Jewish people. And the plan is a 6,000-year plan, or a little bit less than 6,000 years. The plan is that we have to bring the ship called the world, called humanity, we have to bring it into its port. Its final destination is Israel. Israel, not just in the geographical sense, Israel also in the macrocosmic sense, in the cosmic sense of being the revelation. Israel is a place where God is revealed. We say Israel, we mean we need to bring the world to a state where godliness is open and revealed in a permanent way. And that process takes a number of stages. And the first stage is that God obscures Himself. What we call, in Kabbalistic terminology, is called Tzimtzum HaRishon, the first contraction, where God removes, so to speak, you have to be God to figure out how to do this, removes His presence, so to speak, so that He create a reality where His presence is not obvious, is not felt, and ultimately it can result in the creation of a physical world where God's presence is not just not felt, but it's actually obscured. And to believe in God and to find God in this world is actually an endeavor, a very, very difficult endeavor. Many, many people fall by the wayside, and they look for proof, and they look for thing, and there is proof, and there is ways to understand, but it's very difficult to come to, in the sense that there's so many ways you could learn these things which could obscure God. And God wants Himself to be obscured. But what does He want? He wants Himself to be obscured. He wants there to be a tzimtzum, for there to be a contraction, for there to be a darkness, for there to be a veil of darkness where He's not felt. And then He wants His people, He wants the Jewish people to get the Torah at Sinai and to come and to reveal His presence here on earth, which is called Dira B'Tachtonim. He wants to have a dwelling place here in this world. And the process of having a dwelling place here in this world is to find God in this world and to elevate this world, to pull away the smoke screen so that He becomes revealed in this world. And how is that done? That's done by connecting with the various energies, the various things that were created in this world, and elevating them, showing how they really are there in order to serve God. And that starts primarily when the Torah is given at Sinai, because Hashem tells us at Har Sinai, He tells us how to integrate physicality, materialism, with spirituality. He tells us how to use the physical building blocks of this world and to make them more godly. And that's all the mitzvahs. All the mitzvahs are about interacting with the physical world and making this physical world a more holy place. So it tells us how to take food. It doesn't tell us not to eat. To go meditate on the hilltops of Tibet and to starve for as long as you can and die and go up in a chariot to heaven. He tells us how to take food, make sure the food is kosher, make sure it's prepared in the right way, and then make a bracha on it and say, this food was given to me. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam sha'akol niyah bidvaro. This food was given to me because it was made by God and it's given to me in order to give me life. And then what do you do with that life? What do you do with those energy, the calories that give you energy? You burn those calories in service of God. You study Torah, you pray, you help a poor person. And you're taking that energy that you got by the food and you're moving it, you're directing it to God. So that takes place by the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Now, even before the Torah was given at Sinai, the Jews were sent for a preparatory period. For 210 years they were down there in Egypt. What were they doing in Egypt? In Egypt they were also connecting with the physicality, and ultimately they took the wealth of Egypt with them and they took it up as they went to getting the Torah at Har Sinai. What were they doing? What they were doing was taking the sparks of godliness, of holiness that had fallen into Egypt. Egypt was the antithesis of Israel. Israel represents Eretz Hashem, Hashem Elokecha, the land which Hashem is always watching. Israel, as we learned recently, in the last class we learned, Israel relies on the rain. Hashem makes it that it needs to rely on the rain, so it should rely on God, so that Jews should live in a constant state of reliance of Hashem. And even till today, people will tell you it's more difficult to live in Israel. You need more to rely on obvious intervention by Hashem in Israel. Certainly that's what Israel represents, a land where people are more cognizant, more aware of the presence of Hashem. And what could make people more aware of the presence of Hashem than to need to be so reliant on rain? Rain is obviously coming only from Hashem. Whereas Egypt is a land where they got the irrigation system all worked out and they don't really need to feel their dependence on Hashem. So much so that they used to worship the Nile. The Nile River would rise over its banks and irrigate all the fields. It's called the fertile delta region, the region of the Nile, because it irrigates its lands very, very adequately. So when somebody knows, for example, somebody recently told me a very sad thing. He recently shared with me that till very recently, he's in his 50s or maybe in his 60s, till very recently he thought he's going to inherit a large amount of money, so he didn't really have to work. So he always kind of never really made an effort into working, into providing for his future. He knew that his parents are wealthy and they're going to leave him an inheritance. Unfortunately, somebody in the family seems to have bamboozled him out of his share in the inheritance, and all of a sudden at this late stage in life, he realizes that he doesn't, he's going to have to somehow make do with what he has. And that's a startling realization to have. So, sometimes, and this is the situation in Egypt, the person thinks that he has, the Nile provides for all my needs, I don't have to worry. God? I don't need God. I'm okay. The river takes care of me. Not understanding it was the river, it's also from God. But what it does is that it creates a lack of awareness or a lack of dependence. There's nothing like being dependent on God to finding God. They say the statement, there's no, they say there are no atheists in the foxhole. When the bombs, God forbid, when somebody is in an army and the bullets are flying and he's in a foxhole hiding out, it's natural to turn to God. Or they say, unfortunately, there's no atheist under the surgeon's scalpel. God forbid somebody needs surgery. Yeah, you know that there's a surgeon, but you also know that you need God to guide his hands to make sure that things work out well. So when you're dependent on God, that leads you to find Him, to believe in Him, to truly take away all your big, your egoistic kind of thinking I can handle it without Him, and you start opening yourself up to the awareness of God's presence. So Israel is that kind of land. Egypt represents the lands where God is hidden. What are the Jews in Egypt, 210 years, what are they doing? They're about to go out, and they're going to go to get the Torah, and they're going to go to Israel. What do they take with them? They take with them a lot of wealth. What was the purpose of taking the wealth? The purpose of taking the wealth was because that symbolized and represented and actually encapsulated taking the strength of Egypt and elevating it, making it part of godliness. Taking all that wealth and making it part of the experience of getting the Torah at Sinai and then going and settling in Israel. So in that way they were taking the sparks. Kabbalah teaches us that before this world was created there was so to speak, a controlled explosion, godly explosion, where there were many sparks of holiness that fell down and were embedded into this world. And our mission is to locate those sparks. I don't want to say Pokemon, I'm not so sure how Pokemon works, but it almost sounds a little bit like Pokemon. Maybe the Pokemon studied, maybe they got it from our sources, that you got to go and find and locate those sparks of holiness, of godliness that fell down into this world. And when you find them and you activate them, you elevate them. How do you activate the sparks? In our simple language, let's say, for example, in the food we have, they are created by God and there's sparks of holiness there. When we eat that food, we connect to that energy, we connect to those sparks. And what's happening spiritually is that if we go and help somebody with that energy, we're making that energy just like a sacrifice, literally burnt up and went to God. You can see it going up in smoke. So we're taking that energy and spiritually we're raising the energy. So the energy goes up and becomes godly. So this is what we're doing. So with the Egypt experience, we were taking those sparks and elevating them, subsequently elevating them to God. How many sparks are there? Kabbalah tells us that there's 288 sparks. 288 sparks. And then the Torah tells us, "V'gam erev rav ala itam," that the Jews came up from Egypt, erev rav. Erev rav literally means the rabble, the people that got mixed into the Jewish people in Egypt. But Kabbalistically it means that 200, rav is the numerical value 202. It tells us that 202 sparks came up with the Jews from Egypt that went with them to Sinai and to Israel. How many sparks are there?
What is a spark actually?
A spark, a nitzot. It's a level, a degree of holiness. Maybe tell them to keep the volume down a little bit. It's a level of holy energy that, so to speak, falls down and becomes embedded into this world. Becomes part of a materialistic experience. So it loses its outwardly, it doesn't look godly. Outwardly, it looks materialistic. Inwardly, there's godly energy. The only way to release that energy is to do something positive and powerful with the energy you get from that thing. So if we think about it mathematically, when the Jews left Egypt, there were 202 sparks, so to speak, godly energies that they took with them. The entire number that need to be found in this, so to speak, cosmic hide and seek, that need to be refined, is 288. Now, how many does that leave us with? 86. So from Exodus, how many years ago did Exodus from Egypt take place? Yetziat Mitzrayim. Yetziat Mitzrayim took place in year 2448 from creation. We are now year 5776. So minus 2448 from 5776, and what do you get? Huh? No, it's more than 3,000 years.
Again, 5,000?
5776 minus 2448.
Come on, cell phones.
3,298 years. Somebody do it with a calculator to make sure we get it right. 5776 minus 2448. 76 minus 2448.
Okay. 3328.
3,328 years. So figure like this. By the time we got to Torah, we only had 86 sparks, nitzotzot, 88 godly energies that we had to, 86, that we had to release, we had to elevate. In the subsequent 3,328 years, we're working on those 86 sparks, which tells us that we're working pretty. How does that work? How is it that we're working so long on such a small amount of sparks, whereas the Jews in Egypt in 210 years took care of 86? So the answer lies in the fact that we know there's another statement that goes as follows. We say that the people of Israel are really represented in the Torah. How many words are there in the Torah? It says, Yesh shishim ribui otiyot laTorah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. What does 600,000 mean? There are 600,000 souls. What do you mean 600,000 souls? Thank God today there's how many Jews? There's many millions of Jews. And if you count all the Jews that were throughout the generations since the giving of the Torah, where that's when the Jewish people really became properly, or as we could say halachically Jewish, we had many, many millions of Jews that lived throughout the generations. But what do you mean when we say there's only 600,000 Jewish souls? So the way it works, first of all, just a note about the fact that there's 600,000 letters in the Torah. If you count, if you count the amount of letters in the Torah, you get to 300 and something thousand. 300,000 and something. So what does it mean there's 600,000 letters in the Torah? We don't know exactly how to count it, but there's a way to count where you count also the vowels, and if you count it in that way, so then there are, it'll come to 600,000. And it says, the Alter Rebbe writes, the author of the Tanya writes in the Torah, I don't recall exactly where, but he writes, we don't know exactly how to count it, so we can't point out exactly where it's 600,000, but this was handed down in our tradition, the Torah. Our sages tell us that 600,000 letters in the Torah. It works. How exactly it works, we have to figure it out. But why is it so important, this concept, there's 600,000 letters in the Torah? Because every Jew represents a letter in the Torah. What's so exciting about that? What's so exciting about that is because if a letter is missing in the Torah, the whole Torah is invalid. And this tells us something very potent. It tells us that there's no such thing as a redundant Jew. Every Jew is an intrinsic part of the community. So much so, our sages tell us if there would have been one Jew missing at the Sinai experience at Matan Torah, Hashem wouldn't have given the Torah. Nobody's extra, nobody's redundant. And this should be a very, very powerful message to us, especially today, where we're sitting and mourning. Sometimes, one of the problems of becoming sad is sometimes people take it to the wrong place. Sad doesn't mean depressed. Today we're remembering something very sad in our history, and something that pains us and hurts us till today. So during the other days of the year, we try somehow and move it to our subconscious, so we can function. We're always conscious that we want Mashiach, we're missing the Beis HaMikdash, but we try and do things that will hasten the coming of Mashiach, and not so much focus on that which we lost and that which we're sad about, because being sad has with it sometimes a side product. The side product is not very good. The side product is sometimes when somebody gets sad, he starts getting depressed. And depressed really means that he starts doubting his own self-worth. He starts doubting his own self-existence. When a person starts doubting his own self-worth, that can lead a person to the worst sins. Like there was a great Hasidic Rebbe that said, doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that being sad is a sin. But where sadness can take a person, the worst sin in the world can't take a person. Because you know what sadness, if it leads to low self-esteem, if it leads to inferiority, if it leads to a person feeling that he has no value, then why should I even make an effort? Why should I even try and do the right thing? Who cares? Who am I anyway? I'm a nobody. You think God cares if I do the worst violations, God forbid, or not? So that's a very, very dangerous place to be. So on Tisha B'Av, we have to remind ourselves, we're sad and we're pain and we're remembering, and we're not letting our minds get off the destruction. On the other hand, we also have to remember that we're very, very valuable, and the only thing we can do to get rid of our pain is to motivate ourselves to do more good deeds, which brings the Mashiach closer. So it's very important to remember on Tisha B'Av this concept, that every single Jew is a member of, is like a letter in the Torah. And the Torah that's missing one letter is an invalid Torah. So each and every one of us is critical for the whole people. Therefore, having said that, we revert to the original question. How can we say there's only 600,000 souls? So whose soul do I have? I'm Jew number, I don't know, hundreds of millions. If you count the Jews throughout the generations over the last 3,328 years, all the Jews that have lived, there's got to be many hundreds of millions, maybe even more. So which soul number am I? And if I'm soul number, how many millions on? 1 second, I thought there's only 600,000 souls, you say. There's only 600,000 letters in the Torah, corresponding to 600,000 souls. So what happens? So the answer is like this. Kabbalistically, it's explained. 600,000 souls are general souls. Those are, so to speak, the souls, the amount of souls that God produces, so to speak, if you want to use language of today's world.
Template.
600,000 templates, or 600,000 Jews that are produced in the factory of souls. Now those souls are considered neshamot klaliyot. They are all general souls, in as much as from those souls then get splintered out many different particles of souls. Now the particles of souls, they themselves have within them all the ingredients necessary to recreate, to become a complete battery, so to speak, to become the complete vivifying soul of one individual. And today we can understand that. Today we know, after we have atoms, and more importantly, after we have genes, and we have cells and all that, we know that we can take, that if you actually take a cell, the cell has within it the potential to have all kinds of different things grow from it. So think of it in that way, that the splinter of a soul has within it all the necessary requirements and ingredients to become a full-fledged soul. So 600,000 souls we're talking about are 600,000 representative souls, general souls. And they are the ones that come out of Egypt. Now, when we talk about the 288 nitzotzot, the 288 sparks of godliness that descended here into this world, we also are talking about general sparks. In other words, we're talking about sparks that then splinter off and become a multitude of sparks that need to be released, need to be elevated, need to be redeemed. Now, the Jews that are in Egypt are numbered 600,000. So in other words, the Jews that are in Egypt, they are the general souls. When a general soul comes into contact with a general spark, he can elevate it. A general soul elevates a general spark. So for those general souls, for those, so to speak, original souls, when they activated, when they integrated and pulled out the sparks, they were able to accomplish 202 sparks. Subsequent generations, subsequent Jewish people are all engaging in the remaining 86 sparks. But while we engage with the remaining 86 sparks, we have to know that we are also the splinter souls. And therefore the sparks we elevate, we are elevating splinter sparks. So it's taking us a long time. So it's taking us, and as the generations go further and further, so the Jews that lived in the temple times, they were even more general than us. And as we go further and further, more and more souls become born into this world, they become more and more splintered in a sense. They become less and less general, become more and more splintered, and therefore the impact they can have on the sparks and elevating the sparks is more and more small. But it also tells us, well, we shouldn't get disheartened, because it tells us we're at the very, very, very end of this journey. And that's why the Rebbe told us time and time again. The Rebbe said that his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, said that all we have to do is polish the buttons. It's like there's a whole costume, there's a whole suit ready, and all we still have to do in our generation, the previous Rebbe said in the 1940s, is to polish the buttons. So polishing the buttons is a little last work done. The Rebbe in our generation said, we polished the buttons already. Now it's just about to happen. So we in a sense, we are like, the straw that broke the camel's back, that famous analogy, where they keep loading up the camel with more and more and more weight. And finally they put one more straw. How heavy is a straw? Nothing. But that straw broke the camel's back. It's the tipping point. So we are at the time where we're at that tipping point. All we need to do is find that final act, find that final deed to do, and then we tip, and the Mashiach comes. But it doesn't take away from the fact of understanding we are very, very, very small players in sense of the cosmic sense. Because we're the final players, we have huge cosmic relevance. But if you want to look just at in terms of greatness, and in terms of how can you judge this? But the way we are relative to the souls of the Jews who left Egypt, we're very splintered, extremely minutely splintered, a little atom or a little cell. So therefore, this is the explanation that everyone gave. Why is it that all the fasts and the celebrations and the holidays we celebrate are all related back either to the Exodus, the Jews that left Egypt, or the Jews that were there while there was a Beit HaMikdash. And all of those celebrations and commemorations are incumbent upon the entire Jewish people. Things that take place after that, so there can be communities that celebrate this event, or that commemorate that event, or can make even a fast for a tragedy that took place in their community, and can make a celebration for something that took place in their community. But nothing halachically is binding on the entire Jewish people in the same way as what happened to the Jews when we left Egypt and when we had a Beis HaMikdash and when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Why? So we can explain, well, because we lost the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was basically the final arbiter, the final word for the entire Jewish people. The Torah tells us, and here's something very important to remember, when people try and sometimes think in their mind, why is it that it's so important to keep even the laws that the rabbis gave us in the Talmud? We know we want to keep what Hashem tells us in the Torah, but what the rabbis tell us in the Talmud, some people think maybe you can be a little bit more lax about it, but that's not the case. Why? Because the Torah tells us, in the very Torah, Hashem tells us that Lo tasuru mikol asher yagidu lecha yaminu smol. Don't move away from what the rabbis tell you, right or left. You got to keep exactly to what they tell you. They have the right, and they have the tradition, and they have the, so to speak, Hashem's magic wand, Hashem's scepter, to tell you what it is Hashem wants. Do we have that today? Not at that level. So long as we had what we started off before saying, the smicha, so long as we had that unbroken tradition of ordination from Moshe, there was an unbroken chain of transmission, and they had the power, the Sanhedrin, with the group of 71 judges, who had the final say of everything in Jewish law. And there could be no two opinions. Once they came to their verdict, based on a majority of them, once they came to the verdict, they all had to agree to that verdict. Even the dissenters could not maintain their dissent. If there were 36 that said one way, then the other 34, the other 35 had to go along with the majority, and they had to sign on that same decision. That became something binding on the entire Jewish people, and according to many opinions, it became binding biblically. Because if Hashem says in the Torah, in the Bible, you have to listen to them, then that becomes an instruction from Hashem. So one of the things that the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash caused is we lost that Sanhedrin. That was stamped out, was wiped out. But until that, that includes all the things that are recorded in the Talmud and the Gemara, all that is binding on every single Jew. So all those things, so in a very practical way, that's why there can only be fasts and commemorations and celebrations that are binding on all of us that start from back then. But in the inner understanding, we just gave an explanation according to Kabbalah, according to the inner understanding of the Torah. Why is that? It's because as we start to splinter off and become smaller particles and smaller segments of the Jewish people, of the Jewish whole, so then we start to be able to integrate, we start to be able to elevate smaller and smaller level of sparks. And we cannot say that everything that happened to the Jews 70 years ago is incumbent upon all the Jews for all of history. So while it's closer to us and in our psyche and in our awareness, there's no question, when we sit on Tisha B'Av, we are remembering all the sufferings of all the Jews. And some people after the Holocaust did write Kinot, did write lamentations, remembering the Holocaust, and some people say it, but not everybody. It's not universally accepted by all communities. Not because we don't all mourn the Holocaust. We all mourn the Holocaust, and there's nothing more painful to most of the Jewish community in today's generation, actually all of the Jewish community, whether or not your family came from Europe or not, but this is something that happened in the most recent history that was something that nobody believed could ever happen. And we pray, the Rebbe told us, Lo takum pa'amayim tzara, it will never happen again. But, still in all, it was happening to us as splinter souls. It wasn't happening to our ancestors who were general souls. And therefore, what we choose to focus on still is we go back to the source of it all. Because what happened to them there, this was really why there could be a Holocaust. This is why there could be suffering, even today, because of what happened then, because the temple was destroyed. So we go back and remember the source, and we figure if we remember the source and we fix it at the source, then we're going to be able to also fix it in the extrapolation, in the subsequent result of what we're still suffering. We are still, the Holocaust was still a continuation of destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, still a continuation of destruction of the temple. And any time, take all this, the suffering we have still today, the fact that a Jew cannot walk in the streets in many places in the world and feel personally safe, the fact that a Jew, even in the holy land of Israel, walks in many places in Israel and unfortunately at various times has to look behind his back, God forbid, and be scared of various things that are taking place there. And I don't want to speak about it in length, because even speaking about it is painful. But we all know, we're not living in La La Land, we all know that anywhere we are in the world, and if we think we can hide, they don't know who we are. That's not the case. An anti-Semite can smell out and sniff out a Jew from way, 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 way out there. They know exactly how to find us somehow. Why is it? Because anti-Semitism is not only something that comes from them, it's something that's embedded. Unfortunately, sadly, ever since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, we have this concept. We have the concept that there's an obscuring of God's presence. When there's an obscuring of God's presence, we have the concept of Lama derech l'shaim tzalecha. Why is the way of the wicked successful? And we have the famous question, Lama tzadik v'ralo, rasha v'tovlo. Why is it sometimes that people are good and bad things happen to them? And why is it that people are bad and good things happen to them? That all comes as a result of the obscuration, of the concealment of Hashem. And the concealment that Hashem chooses to conceal himself. Why does he choose to conceal himself? Chooses to conceal himself. That's a good question. Because as the Medrash tells us, really, lo nora alilal b'nei Adam. It all started from the original sin when Adam Arishain sinned and ate from the garden, from the tree. And that really all started because Hashem had embedded within creation. It's a secret. You shouldn't say it maybe in a public way on the internet, but it's a secret the Medrash says. Nora alilal b'nei Adam, really Hashem in a way had already planned that there should be this whole process. Now, before it happened, we don't know about it. After it happened, we know that today everything that was meant to happen, happened. What's the purpose? The purpose is because from the great descent comes a great ascent. Hashem desires that he be found where he's most least likely to be found. And that's what we're sitting here and doing. We're remembering the destruction. But in a few minutes, we're also going to move on to a new zone. Soon it's going to become Chatzos, it's going to become midday. Once it becomes midday, we move on to a different zone. How do we move on to a different zone? I mean, the Beis Hamikdash is not rebuilt yet. The Beis Hamikdash is not rebuilt. So how can we just go out? How can we go on? And so we'll soon explain how we do that. But first, a little medrash I discovered I never saw before, which gives us a bit of an insight. The medrash says like this. The medrash is called Medrash Eila Ezkara. One of the things we say, basically we're sitting on the floor and we're reading Kinot. Kinot, what does Kinot means? Lamentations, basically. Klogenzach. Klogenzach means to woe. How do you say it in English? Klogenzach. To lament, to cry, to moan. We're moaning about all the bad things that happen to us, and there's a whole. Most of us don't like reading it very much. We read it because it's part of the tradition, part of what's in the siddur. It's a special siddur of Tisha B'Av, but it's not very pleasant. It's crying and moaning about all the bad things that happen to us. And one of the things we talk about is the 10 martyrs, the Asara Halugei Malchut, the 10 martyrs that were killed by the Roman government. And here's how. There's a medrash that talks about it, but interesting the way the medrash starts. Introduction. The medrash starts like this. When, say it also in the Hebrew, when God created the trees, they were very proud of their, even almost arrogant, with their tall height. Think about it. In creation, there was nothing created till the trees were created that were, and we know that creation was created. The world was created in its full form, right? So trees were not created as little saplings. Trees were already created, big trees, the cedar trees, the big fancy trees. When they were created, they were arrogant. They said, "Aha!" They stood up to full height, They felt good about themselves. Once God created iron, steel, then they started feeling lowly. They lowered themselves and they said, Oy lanu, woe to us. Hashem already created something that can cut us down. So long as there wasn't metal, how are you going to cut down a tree? How are you going to make, if you want to make a saw, you can make a wooden saw technically, but how are you going to make the wooden saw? So you need iron. The thing is, in Pirkei Avot we're taught, af tzvat mitzvat asuya. How are you going to make the iron? You need to fashion the iron. If you want to put it into fire, you need something else to hold it. So that's why some say that was one of the things that Hashem created in the 6 days of creation. He put down a metal of tongues, so they should be able to create more metal. At any rate, so this is the way the trees felt. Kach, similarly, achar churban habayit, after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, hayu peritzei ador mitgaim. The peritzei ador, peritz is usually used. The peritz is like a squire, a landowner. It was used in Yiddish a few hundred years ago in the Russian countryside and the East European countryside. You had a peritz. Peritz was the squire. It was almost like a governor of his whole region. So peritzei ador, but here it means like the arrogant people of the generation, mitgaim. They were arrogant, v'amru, and they said, ma ifsadnu bazeh shenechrav habayit. What have we lost from the fact that we don't have a Beis Hamikdash? I wonder if these people were connected to the Biryonim. There were a group that we speak about in our history when when Yerushalayim was laid siege. They were what we call Biryonim, the gangsters. They didn't let, the sages felt that it would be better to negotiate with the Romans at that time. They felt there would be no way to overpower the Roman legions, and better would be to negotiate. The Biryonim, the gangsters, they were zealots, so they were not so much zealous, but they were militants. And the militants felt, we got to do battle. And so what they did is they burnt. Yerushalayim had rich men that had enough supplies for 21 years. Jerusalem could have maintained the status quo for 21 years. Came the Biryonim, these militants, and they burnt the storage houses of the Jews. Jewish people that forced a military approach by burning down the nonetheless, as we know the story goes, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai saw that this would only result in the total destruction of the entire Jewish nation, with everything, with its scholarliness. They wouldn't just lose the Beis Hamikdash, they would lose the people, they would lose the scholars, they would lose the Torah learning, and possibly the entire Jewish nation was at stake. So he took matters in his own hand, and he had his students let out a rumor that he was dead, that he was very sick, finally that he died. They took him out in a coffin. The militants were not letting out dead people, they were usually stabbing them. The students were saying, look, what are the Romans going to say that even your own rabbis, even your own great sages, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a great sage, you desecrate them in that way? That's the way a people treats its leaders. So they didn't stab the coffin, they let him out, and he got out of his coffin, and he ran over to the Romans. And he presented the Romans, as the story goes, he told the Roman commander that he called him the emperor, he called him king. And he said, I should put you to death for two reasons. A, if I'm the king, why didn't you come till now? Or, first of all, I'm not the king. And that's treason. To call me the king when the emperor is in Rome is an act of treason. You have to be put to death. Secondly, if I'm the king, why didn't you come till now? So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, first of all, you are the king. You didn't know it till now. And indeed, they got messages that the emperor had died, and unanimously he had been declared, this general had been declared emperor. Secondly, why I didn't come? Because I wasn't allowed to come till now. And then he said, I have three requests. And the three requests he asked, his first one was, he says, Ten li Yavne v'chachamel. Spare the city of Yavne, which was a city of great Jewish learning, and all the wise scholars of Yavne. In other words, allow for Jewish scholarship and Jewish continuity. And he was granted that. Second thing he asked was, allow Shulshilta de Rabban Gamliel, allow for the family of Rabban Gamliel to be continued. Rabban Gamliel was a scion, was a continuation of the house of David. The king Malchus Beis David has said, allow for this family to continue. Don't eradicate us completely. Don't eradicate the Malchus completely. The third thing was, bring a doctor for Rabbi Tzadok. Rabbi Tzadok had fasted for 40 years because he was trying to ward off, he would eat at night only. We're trying to get the effect of the Churban, of the destruction to go away. He says that we need a doctor for him. These were the three things he took. And the Chachamim and the Gemara has a discussion about whether he did wisely or not. One opinion in the Gemara is quoting a pasuk that says sometimes Hashem puts in. Actually, to quote the pasuk itself is the pasuk itself is. Just 1 second. This is the Gemara in Gittin, Daf, page 56, on the first side. He says that, actually it's side 2, Daf base. There's a pasuk that says, Meishiv chachamim achor v'da'atam yisakel. It's a pasuk in, where's the pasuk? The pasuk is in Yeshaya. And the pasuk means, he, in other words Hashem, turns wise men backwards and makes their thinking foolish. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai should have answered Vespasia and Vespasionus. What should he be answered him? He should have asked for more than just Yerushalayim, right? He should have asked for more than the three things he asked for. What should he be asked for? He should have asked for Yerushalayim. If he's giving him his wish, he should have asked not to destroy Yerushalayim. So there's one opinion, Rabbi Yosef, in the name of Rabbi, some say Rabbi Akiva, says that the verse that it says in Yeshayahu, that God turns wise men backwards and makes their thinking foolish, applies in this case to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that he didn't ask for the gold, he didn't ask for Yerushalayim. Somehow Hashem, in other words, it's part of the destruction. Hashem placed into his thinking that he shouldn't ask for that. But then there's another thought. Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara explains, why really, the Gemara seems to finish with this. In other words, the Gemara is thinking, you can't blame Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. What was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai thinking? Yochanan ben Zakkai thought Vespasionus might not fulfill so great a request, and therefore there won't even be a small measure of salvation. So he asked for smaller favors. In other words, there's two ways of looking at it. Either this is something that Hashem embedded in him, which he should have really asked for Yerushalayim, or what the thinking of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was, that really he's not going to get the full request if he asks for Yerushalayim. These guys came to destroy Yerushalayim. He may get some smaller things if he asks for them. And I guess, parenthetically, this is always going to be in a negotiation, this is always going to be the skill of a negotiator, what he should ask for. I mean, kids do this all the time. Kids by nature, when they ask their parents for things, so you can see if a kid has emotional intelligence, if he knows what to ask for and what he can get. You see when somebody doesn't have emotional intelligence, when they ask you for something they're not going to get. And very often, but anyway, that's just a sideline. But here we see the Gemara has two approaches to it. So I'm just thinking, having said that, that was we call Briyonim. Those were the militants that forced the war. Now there's a new group here, the Medrash says, Peritzei Hador. There are those that are the arrogant people of the generation, who I guess, they didn't want to feel so melancholy, so downcast that we lost the Beis HaMikdash. So what did they say? Listen to what they say. What did we lose by the fact that the temple was destroyed? We have scholars. Right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai achieved the fact that they left the scholars. We have scholars. And they teach the people Torah and mitzvahs. And they teach the mitzvahs, so, okay, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, don't get so upset. Why are we calling them Pritzei Ador? I mean, they were pragmatic. They just wanted maybe not to be so depressed. It's Pritzei Ador, I think, because there's a difference between being happy with what you have and being positive, and then between changing, warping the reality, warping changing how do I want to say it? Sometimes we have a just fast for half a day, or fasting for more than 12 hours, and you lose your words. There's sometimes a standard, and so when you can't live up to the standard, so there's two ways of approach. Well, I can change the standard, and that's unfortunately what many people today, that's the way they view many things in life. Well, if everybody's doing that, let's change the standard. Or there's a standard, and I know right now I'm not living up to the standard, but the standard is a true standard. I'm not going to change the standard. So similarly, when it comes to the looking at the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, there's two ways we can look at it. There's one way saying we lost the Beis Hamikdash. It's a tremendous loss, and we still mourn it till today. It doesn't mean to say that we live in a state of depression and we don't understand that we're still connected to Hashem, and we still have to do Torah, we still have to do mitzvahs, and we still have days of joy, and we still, generally speaking, and even on Tisha B'Av, we still have to have, an inherent level of joy that we're happy to be part of Hashem's people. And we're happy to even be able to sit here and mourn. That's also serving Hashem. But on the other hand, we have to understand that we have a great loss. The Peritze Adar, this is the problem. I'm thinking out loud. The Peritze Adar, these arrogant people wanted to say, who cares we don't have a Beis Hamikdash? Not they said, who cares about Judaism? The standard has changed now. We have scholars. We can do Torah mitzvahs. Nothing to mourn. No, that's Peritze Adar. Those are arrogant people. Those are people that are breaking down the whole cohesiveness, the whole true wholesomeness of Yiddishkeit. Because Judaism is, as the Rambam tells us, why do we pray and hope for Mashiach? Because that is Shleimut HaTorah VaMitzvah. The Torah is given. If you look at all the mitzvahs, you know how many mitzvahs we can't do today? There's a huge amount of mitzvahs we can't do because we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. You want to truly be Jewish and connect to Hashem. We know that the 613 mitzvahs are corresponding to the 613 strands of the neshama and the 248 limbs of the body and the 365 sinews or veins of the body. To truly connect to Hashem, physically and spiritually, you need to truly be connected to the 613 mitzvahs. We can't do them today, most of them. We need a Beis Hamikdash. So we cry and we mourn and we pray and we plead and we do mitzvahs and we do good deeds to get the Beis Hamikdash, because ultimately having the Beis Hamikdash is the only way we can truly be Jewish. The Rambam says if you want to be a true Jew, you need a Beis Hamikdash. We don't have it, so of course we don't become depressed to the point where we can't work. We keep up life and we have to be joyous in many ways. But the Peritzim, we're calling them negative people, that they said, nah, we still have the scholars. Anyway, so what happened? What happens later historically? Comes the Medrash and continues. Miyad natan HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'leiv ha'keisa shel Romi lilmod torat Moshe mipi chachamim muskinim. Somehow God put into the heart of the Caesar, the emperor of Rome, to study some Torah. And you know what he studied? He started from the book of Bereshis, from creation, and he got to the portion that says Eila Mishpatim. And in Eila Mishpatim there's a law, v'gonev ishu mechalo mot yumat v'gomer. If somebody steals, kidnaps another person, there's a death penalty. All of a sudden now he says, I'm going to call the scholars. He calls the scholars and he says, guys, whoever sells somebody else, what happens to him? What happened to the 10 brothers of Yosef that sold Yosef to slavery? The Torah says if you sell somebody, if you kidnap somebody and sell him, death. Whatever happened with the people of Israel, which the children of Israel comprised then of the 11 children of Israel. 10 of them who were involved in the sale. What happened to them? He says, if they would be alive, I would put them on the court, and I would judge them, and I would kill them if they're not alive. I'm going to give you 3 days. See what the answer is. And they said that Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol purified and elevated himself, and he went up to heaven. And he met Gabriel, the angel. And he says, why did you come up here? And Gabriel, he Rabbi Shmuel says because there's the Roman Caesar has brought us this predicament. He says he wants to put us all to death. I want to know, is this something that's come from up high? And he says that in the end we're not going to be able to continue on this medrash right now, but basically what's decided is that indeed this comes from up high, and 10 of the great sages are martyred, are killed in the sanctification of God's name. So in other words, this even for those people that thought Judaism could continue without a Beis HaMikdash, we still had all the scholars. Unfortunately, even our scholars were killed. But throughout the generation, it's not just we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, it's even our people are also. Our scholarship has been affected. Our leadership, unfortunately, has been killed, as we know, throughout the generations. In the Holocaust, we lost, as we say, we lost the Pnei Hadar, we lost the leadership, the great, great, great Jewish people. Many of them were lost. And so this is all what we're mourning and so on and so forth today. But now, two things. First of all, I want to tell a story which I just mentioned, that even on Tisha B'Av we are still joyous. I want to give you a story which will give you perspective on how we can still be joyous while we mourn. How does that go? It's a nice story, maybe famous. If you've been to Shul before, you may have heard it from me. Story of the two brothers, Rabbi Elimelech and Rabbi Zusha. Two famous brothers because they're great students of the Maggid of Mezrich, one of the early founders of Hasidism. And they were both traveling in the villages of Russia or of Poland. And what they would do is they would look for causes. They would look to be able to help Jews in need. And once they stumbled upon a place where the local policeman decided that they were up to no good, and he threw them into the jail. Now the jail then was not very exciting. They were in the jail with all kinds of other rogues and convicts. And Rabbi Elimelech sees Reb Zusha crying. He asks Reb Zusha, why are you crying? He says, I'm crying because I can't pray over here. I can't study here. It's not a holy place. Because you know, they didn't provide bathrooms. They provided for the needs of the prisoners a pot in the middle of the room, and everybody would do their bodily functions there. So Rabbi Elimelech asks Reb Zusha, that's why you're crying? He says, yeah. He says, so why can't you study or pray here? He says, what do you mean? Because it says in the Torah that you have to study and pray in a place that's clean. And when there's bodily waste, you have to cover it, you have to move it, you can't pray there. So he says, aha, have you ever done that mitzvah before, where you wanted to pray, you wanted to daven, but you couldn't, because it's an unclean place? He says, no. He says, you just got an opportunity to do a mitzvah. You're connecting to God by not praying to Him right now because it's a dirty place. Ooh, they started to think about that and meditate about that. They say, wow, when you do a mitzvah, you got to be joyous. Happy that we're Jews, that Hashem gave us an opportunity to connect to Him via His mitzvahs. Oh, they start dancing. When they start dancing, the goyim, the non-Jews, the convicts in the prison see them dancing. Hey, these Jews are crazy, but hey, why not? Let's dance. They also start dancing. The policeman who doesn't like this business, the jail is supposed to be a place where people cry, where people are sad. So he calls them up and he calls over the people and says, hey, stop, halt, why are you guys dancing? The non-Jews all point to the two Jewish brothers, Rabbi Elimelech and Reb Zusha. No, they're dancing. So he asks them, why are you guys dancing? He points to the pot in the middle of they point to the pot in the middle of the room. He says, that makes you happy? Takes it out. And now they can daven. Now they can learn. What is the message of the story? It's a beautiful story. It tells us, if Hashem tells us right now to be sad, to sit on the floor and to talk about the destruction, in reality that makes us very happy. In other words, we're serving Hashem by doing this. Why aren't we learning regular Torah? Why aren't we sitting and having a feast? Why aren't we doing our usual joyous, exuberant behavior of serving Hashem? Why? Because Hashem told us not to. Because He told us right now, our sages told us this is a day we have to, till midday particularly, is a day where we have to focus on the sadness, we have to focus on the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. If this is something we have to do, it's also something we have to be happy about. And so that's why by Hasidim, even with all the sadness of Tisha B'Av, but there was a certain element of an underlying feeling of closeness to Hashem, which brought how shall I say, an understanding that even while we're mourning, this is also a closeness to Hashem. That Hashem tells us to remember Him in this way, And therefore we also feel, in a sense, also a certain simcha, not an exuberance, and we're doing things, we're sitting on the floor, and we're not showering today, we're not eating, we're not drinking, we can't anoint ourselves, we can't brush our teeth. And in many ways we feel like we're mourning. God forbid if somebody loses a loved one. That's what they have to do. And we lost a loved thing, a Beis Hamikdash. But still in all, there is a certain joy. And there's something else, when we come to Mincha time particularly, that we focus on. That is, that we focus on the fact that there were two ways. There's a chapter 79 in Tehillim is Mizmar LaAsaf. Mizmar LaAsaf is a song to Asaf. What is a song? The song starts like this: Elokim ba'u goyim benachalatecha tim'u et echal kodshecha. Almighty God, goyim came into your holy temple, and they sullied, they dirtied, they made impure your holy temple. Says the Medrash, Mizmar LaAsaf. That's a song? That the Goyim came, they sing a song. Hey, 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 the Goyim came, destroyed the temple. It's not a song. Kina LaAsaf mi boile. That should be a lamentation. Say, oi, they came and they destroyed the temple. What kind of a Mizmar? Says the Medrash like this. That really, Hashem had two options. When he got very upset with the Jewish people, he could have, God forbid, taken it out on the people themselves and destroyed the Jewish people. Chas v'shalom, chalil v'chas, heaven forfend. Maybe we never even think of such an option. Or destroy his temple. And the Medrash tells us, Ki lo chamosoi al ha'etzim v'al ha'avanim. Ki la chamato al ha'etzim v'al ha'avanim. Hashem let out his pent-up anger on the wood and on the stones. He let the enemy destroy the Beis Hamikdash. By destroying the Beis Hamikdash, he, so to speak, released his pent-up anger, but his people was spared. And this is why, as the Beis Hamikdash, really we said that after midday on Tisha B'Av, that's when the Beis Hamikdash is more fiercely burning, because they started burning the Beis Hamikdash and on the day of Tisha B'Av. Yet we find that in Halacha, on the day of the 9th of Av, as it comes after midday, we relax our mourning. We still can't eat, we can't drink, but we get up off the floor, we sit on a chair. We got to put on our tefillin after midday, which we didn't do today because tefillin is called something beautiful, and we can't wear beautiful things. It's an adornment. And this morning we're still heavily mourning. So while it continues, but we release the mourning. Why are we minimizing the mourning? In a way, it should be that in the afternoon of Tisha B'Av we should have more mourning. The Beis Hamikdash is literally destroying. The fire is crackling and consuming the Beis Hamikdash. The answer is because while the more the Beis Hamikdash burns, and the more you see, God forbid, Hashem's anger, so to speak, you see Hashem's love. But Hashem chose not to do it to His children. And so while this is happening, there's a very powerful display of Hashem's affection as well. And just to finish off, for those great people who were able to see the truth, the great Kabbalists, the great Tzaddikim, they told us that the reality is that Hashem's destruction of the Beis Hamikdash really has to be viewed in terms of a renovation. When you need to renovate a home in order to build something much grander, you can't just add. If you want to make something that's truly different, you have to knock it down, and only then can you truly build a new edifice. And so this is what Hashem is doing, deep down, in a hidden way, because externally we're mourning, but deep down what Hashem is really doing is al menat. The whole destruction is in order that Hashem should give us the third Beis Hamikdash, which is going to be much grander, much greater, and it's not going to be able to be destroyed ever and ever, forever and ever. The kingdom of Hashem will be an everlasting one. Hashem's name will no longer be obscured. There'll be, as it says, V'haya Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. Hashem will be a king over the entire land. Bayom hahu yih Hashem echad u'shmo echad. On that day Hashem will be one, and His name will be one in a revealed way. Today Hashem is one, His name is one also. But then it will be in a revealed way. So this is what we pray for, this is what we hope for. And as the Beis Hamikdash burns, we know that Hashem is showing His love to us, because on the one hand He's not doing it to us, He allows His people to continue to flourish and to be, and we will be forever. And He also is making room for a new Beis Hamikdash. And that is the third Beis Hamikdash which we look forward to, which will come down from heaven, bimheira b'yameinu, speedily in our days. Amen.
Amen.